Welcome back live from the Antarctic, where I have to say it is rather warm today. We've heard quite a bit this week from scientists warning about the disastrous consequences of climate change. Well, tonight we've been given, all of us, the royal seal of disapproval. The Princess Royal told ITV News exclusively that the human race is idle and dirty. She blamed our consumer society for contributing to the rising temperatures. They say Antarctica is a frozen wasteland. Well, it's amazing who you bump into down here. Racy transport for the royal visitor, but Princess Anne is in Antarctica for a serious purpose, to see for herself the research by British scientists into climate change. Research she believes suggests something significant is happening here.
What is evident from what their presence here is telling them is that the changes are apparently more rapid than they've been before. And it is a measurable one, and you can actually pin it down to certain periods in history. So that, that is important, and people must be aware of that.
Do you think the world is taking climate change seriously enough?
No, I think it comes under the inconvenient heading, doesn't it? Because actually what it means is that we're probably rather dirty and idle, because we've produced a whole lot of things which make life easier, but at the same time they're rather dirty, and we accumulate more and more and are less good at using waste. And we've got to be really serious about that. As man, we've just got to, even if it wasn't for global warming, to be frank, we need to tidy up our act because we are filthy.
Harsh words, and she thinks Britain, for one, has to become more eco-friendly.
In Britain, many people are living in houses which aren't exactly designed to be terribly convenient or environmentally friendly. You've got to have governments behind that, because there's more investment there than probably the average individual is really going to stump up. There is enough knowledge out there now to make anything you build in the future considerably more environmentally friendly.
I gather you go by train now a lot from Scotland.
Well, I've done for years.
Down. Have you? Yeah.
Oh, no, I gave up driving to London a very long time ago.
To mark her visit, a mountain range here has just been named after the Princess Royal. Interestingly, it's part of territory also claimed by Argentina. But relax, all claims were frozen by an Antarctic treaty 46 years ago. So what can we all do to make ourselves a little less, as Princess Anne put it, filthy? Today, the government announced it was introducing standards for offsetting. That's funding environmental projects to compensate for the carbon dioxide you produce. Even though some critics say offsetting isn't effective, it is becoming increasingly fashionable. Coldplay and the Rolling Stones offset the carbon from their world tours, and this week Marks & Spencer announced plans to become carbon neutral within 5 years. So how does it work? Well, let's say you take a flight from London to New York. That generates just over half a tonne of CO2 per passenger. And for the cost of £4.58, you can offset that pollution. And specialist companies will invest it back then into the environment, for example, into a solar lighting project in a developing country. Now, as temperatures rise right across the world, so very gradually this part of the Western Antarctic ice field melts. As it melts, so it kills the sea life Antarctica's animals depend on. And it's a domino effect. Fewer plankton mean fewer fish are leading to fewer penguins and seals. Life, as this continent knows it, is changing for sure. Our science editor Lawrence McGinty asks if Antarctica's wildlife is a dying breed.
It's a habitat so hostile you can hardly imagine any wildlife surviving the hardships. But look more closely and the animals are here. A Weddell seal hitching a ride on an iceberg. Penguins too, adelies, which like all wildlife here are superbly adapted to the cold. And that's why they're now threatened by climate change on the Antarctic Peninsula.
These are Adelie penguins, and they live on tiny sea creatures called krill under the ice shelves and ice floes out there. Trouble is, as the Antarctic Peninsula warms up, there's less ice, less krill, and so less food for these penguins.
Krill are the basic food source for almost all the Antarctic food chain, but in the past 30 years, their numbers have dropped by 80%. Climate change could be disastrous for Antarctica's richest environment under the sea. In Rotherham Base's aquarium, biologist Simon Morley explained that animals here are almost uniquely vulnerable to changes in temperature.
To live in the cold water, they have special adaptations that allow them to survive and grow and feed away and reproduce in these waters. And as the temperature warms as it is expected to, as it already is, then we expect quite a lot of these animals actually not to be able to cope with the rising temperature.
There are exceptions. Not all animal populations are in decline. These elephant seals are only juveniles. The adults can weigh up to 2 tons. And although the Antarctic environment is very fragile, they seem to be one of the species that's surviving warming here on the Antarctic Peninsula. But these slumbering giants go against the trend.
Oh, wow. Wow. It got me.
Scientists monitoring populations here, like these nesting and very aggressive skuas, are not optimistic. Head biologist Andy Clark told me temperature rises of 2 or 3 degrees could be devastating.
Some people call it a catastrophe if we lose just one species, and I think there is a moral argument there that that could be the case. What we're looking at here is the possibility of losing large numbers of species, and I think most ecologists would regard that as a bit of a catastrophe.
Scientists are cautious people. For them to even mention the word catastrophe is rare. But that is the potential of global warming here in Antarctica.
Now, earlier this week, if you remember, we visited the Carteret Islands, thousands of miles from here in the South Pacific. The people of the Carterets are thought to be the world's first climate change refugees. 2,000 of them are being evacuated because rising sea levels are flooding the islands they've lived on for centuries. They produce virtually no CO2 of their own, but the world's carbon footprint is leaving a permanent mark there. Tonight, our correspondent Martin Geisler speaks to the people of the Carterets forced out by global warming. Ask them who's to blame, and they blame me and you.
The sound of the conch shell travels right across the island of Pule. The chiefs here have called their people to meetings this way for centuries, but never have they had such important business to discuss. A rising ocean is eating into their home. Low tide reveals the roots of coconut palms. The beach they used to sit on, washed away.
If you're one of those people who thinks, I'll pay attention to global warming when I've seen some hard proof, well, here it is. The islanders are trying to protect themselves as best they can. But defences like this just don't work anymore. As you can see, they're just being battered down. Once a month, when the tide's at its highest, it comes straight through here to about chest height. Look, all the sand's been eaten away already. In fact, the sea has eroded this beach to about 10 metres past that old sea wall. And here's the real worry. This is about the highest point on the island. Once the sea gets up past here, the whole place will be gone.
There is a dreadful irony here. After all, this community emits virtually no carbon. There are no cars on these islands, let alone an airport, and no power to produce fumes. The islanders feel blameless and betrayed by countries they'll never see.
And they spend millions on warheads and ammunition and paying soldiers, killing people. What we are asking is, can they save us by spending maybe 1 million or 2 million just to save poor people who are victimized because of their own making? I find it hard to believe that they don't have the heart to listen and the eyes to see what is really happening in front of them, you know?
It's too late for these islanders, but they are imploring the rest of the planet to learn from this lesson. Scientists believe there could be 50 million environmental refugees worldwide in just 3 years' time.
We live on the same planet. If something is destroyed here, of course it's going to destroy America, Australia, and England, and whatever superpowers that they... It doesn't matter, you know? The disaster of this planet cannot be avoided. Either it kills all of us, or we are saved by them stopping gas emission.
Soon, perhaps within a year, these cultures and customs will be packed up and taken to a place where they mean virtually nothing. The sea is washing away more than just these people's homes.